I've taken quotes from AA literature and give examples of them from my life. The first requirement is that we must be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. 12 and 12. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. I thought alcohol was my friend, and it helped me to deal with my anxiety and depression. It also helped me to be able to sleep. It was not working anymore. My way was not working. I was powerless over stopping or controlling my drinking. I started to know that I had a problem with alcohol, and it already established that my life was unmanageable. I sought out psychiatric help because I was experiencing anxiety and depression. The psychologist suggests we try primal screaming, where I would scream and bang pillows. He also suggested meditation. But meditation is very hard to do when you're hungover. I was running out of medical coverage, so I mentioned my alcohol use. The psychologist gave me a test, which I think consisted of 10 questions, and I think I got 7 right. I felt that I was okay because I did not get them all right. He then gave me the bad news. If I got more than 3 right, I was probably having a problem with alcohol, and I should go to AA and get help. I got rid of him and went on my merry way for a few more years. A similar questionnaire in an AA pamphlet from Central Service, Is AA for you? Have you ever decided to stop drinking for a week or so? It only lasted for a couple of days. Most of us in AA made all kinds of promises to ourselves and to our family. We could not keep them. Then we came to AA. AA said, just try not drinking today. If you do not drink today, you cannot get drunk today. Do you wish people would mind their own business about your drinking? Stop telling you what to do. In AA, we do not tell anyone to do anything. We just talk about our own drinking, the trouble we got into, and how we stopped. We'd be glad to help you if you want us to. Have you ever switched from one kind of drink to another in the hope that this would keep you from getting drunk? We all tried all kinds of ways. We made our drinks weak, or just drank beer, or we did not drink cocktails, or only drank on weekends. You name it, we tried it. But if we drank anything with alcohol in it, we usually got drunk eventually. Have you had an eye-opener upon awakening during the past year? Do you need a drink to get started or to stop shaking? Is a pretty sure sign that you are not drinking socially. Do you envy people who can drink without getting into trouble? At one time or another, most of us had wondered why we're not like most people who really can take it or leave it. Have you had problems connected with drinking during the past year? Be honest. Doctors say that if you had a problem with alcohol and keep on drinking, it will get worse, never better. Eventually you'll die or end up in an institution for the rest of your life. My only hope is to stop drinking. Has your drinking caused problems at home? Before we came into AA, most of us said that it was the people or problems at home that made us drink. We could not see that our drinking just made everything worse. It never solved the problem anywhere or anytime. Do you ever try to get extra drinks at a party because you do not have enough? Most of us used to have a few before we started out if we thought it was going to be that kind of party. And if drinks were not served fast enough, we would go someplace else to get more. Do you tell yourself you can stop drinking at any time you want to, even though you keep getting drunk when you don't mean to? Many of us kidded ourselves into thinking that we drank because we wanted to. After we came into AA, we found out that once we started to drink, we couldn't stop. Have you missed days of work or school because of drinking? Many of us admit now that we called in sick lots of times when the truth was that we're hungover or on a drunk. Do you have blackouts? A blackout is when you've been drinking hours or days that you cannot remember. When we came to AA, we found out that this is a pretty sure sign of alcoholic drinking. Have you ever felt that your life would be better if you did not drink? Many of us started to drink because drinking made life seem better, at least for a while. By the time we got into AA, we felt we were trapped. We were drinking to live and living to drink. We were sick and tired of being sick and tired. I also tried giving up drinking on my own a few times. It would last for a few weeks. I would put a supply of whatever I was drinking in the lower cabinets in the kitchen. Once I opened the bottle or the can, I would be off and running. One of the sayings heard at AA meetings is the first drink gets you drunk. This sets off a phenomenon of craving. I read the doctor's opinion in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and started to understand that I had an allergy. By taking the first drink, it set in motion the mental obsession for more drinks. It is described as the phenomenon of craving. I always had a tendency to finish whatever I had in the house. I was always thinking about drinking at lunchtime, after work, and on weekends. Weekends were made for Michelob. When the liquor stores were closed on Sundays, I was always worried about running out of alcohol. So I was eager to go to bat for my wife's cousin, who was trying to get a liquor license in Marshfield. I went before the Board of Selectmen to testify as to his character and good intentions. He got the license, and I now had a place to go to get whatever liquor I needed on Sundays. He eventually sold the bar, and it turned into the infamous Roadhouse, a biker bar. I would always have a special large glass used for my consumption of alcohol. For example, I had a half-liter frosted mug for beer, but whatever the size, they always seemed to empty quickly. It was almost like they were leaking. The big book, a chapter more about alcoholism. We are like men who have lost their legs. They have never grown new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. Quotes from the big book are the chapter more about alcoholism. Here are some methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks. Never drinking at all, never drinking in the morning. Drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours. Drinking only at parties. Switches from scotch to brandy. Drinking only natural wines. Agreeing to resign if I ever drunk on the job. Taking a trip, not taking a trip. Swearing off forever, with and without a solemn oath. Taking more physical exercise. Reading inspirational books. Going to health farms and sanatoriums. Accepting volunteer commitments to asylums. We can increase the list ad infinitum. Here are some methods I tried for limiting or controlling the amount of alcohol I drank. I tried only drinking on weekends. I tried to stop after a couple of drinks. I switched to Manhattans for 2 small bottles to limit the quantity. I tried switching to wine. I tried switching to marijuana. I even tried giving it up for the 40 days of Lent, but I would never last for all of Lent. Nothing I tried seemed to work. Drinking affected my self-esteem, self-image, and self-respect. I was an egomaniac with low self-esteem. Self will run riot. I was living life on self-will, ego. I was proud about running my life on self-will. I was an adjunct college professor, and I thought I could fix other people by imposing my will on them. As a teacher, I thought I had all the answers to everybody's problem, which was more education. One of my final drinking escapades involved me trying to counsel a maintenance worker on him going back to college to advance his career. At this point in my drinking, I was getting nauseous very often while drinking and having to run to the men's room. Proposition 2.5 had passed to control property taxes, and people working for the state were getting laid off. I was scheduled to get laid off because there was a newly elected Republican regime, and I had been hired under a Democratic regime. So I spent most of my working days at a local bar called Brothers, waiting for the word that I had been laid off. Also, things were not going well at home, where my drinking was causing a lot of problems. So I decided to counsel this fellow that had met at the bar and was working as a janitor for the company I worked for. I told him he needed to better himself by getting back to school. Meanwhile, my life was falling apart, and I'm pretty sure that I had to get up to vomit in the restroom while talking to him. This was quite common for me now to do. For example, at happy hours, I would vomit and then go back to drinking. After vomiting in the restroom, I came back and continued counseling him. The next day, he ran into a coworker of mine, and he asked my coworker who was this asshole he had been talking to, and that turned out to be me. Turned out the fellow was perfectly fine with being a janitor. Another example of self-will was when I took one of my employees to a meeting to try to get him sober. I thought I was going to be able to get Tom sober by forcing him to go to meetings. I had accomplished a lot of things through my own self-will, but I could not get Tom sober. How I got to my first meeting. God entered my life in the form of another alcoholic. He was working for me. I went to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous with him to try to get him sober. One of my drinking buddies, who I used to work with at a toy company, had gotten sober in AA. His name was Frank M. I called him up and asked him what I thought I should do with Tommy B. He was having a problem with alcohol and would not show up for work for a couple of days after we got paid. My friend knew Tommy B. We had all worked together for a while in a software company I had started. My friend suggested that we pick up Tom B. and take him to the Brockton Sunday morning meeting. We did that on September 24th, 1981, and I have not found it necessary to pick up a drink or a substitute since that time. Tom was a fantastic worker when sober, but he never got the program, and he could not get sober. He died when he came home drunk one night and fell, hitting his head on the edge of a coffee table and bled to death. Powerless over alcohol, to 12 and 12. Who cares to admit complete defeat? An admission of powerlessness is the first step in liberation. Relations of humility to sobriety. Mental obsession plus physical allergy. Why must AA hit bottom? This is the only step we must do 100%. Life unmanageable. I knew that my life was unmanageable. I had sought outside help in the form of a psychologist, but it took me a long time to admit that alcohol was the problem. I thought alcohol was my friend, but I had tried quitting on my own and giving it up for Lent, never successful for very long. Identify. After going to my first meeting, I was starting to hear things that I could identify with, and I started becoming comfortable with going to meetings. Some of my old drinking buddies were going to the Brockton Sunday morning meeting also. I started to go with them on a regular basis. At one of my early meetings, one of my friends, Artie, gave me a big book, and he told me to read chapter 5, how it works. I did what he suggested, and I started to realize that what AA was all about. I started to listen and take some of the suggestions I was hearing at the meetings. I think it was my second or third meeting that I heard a person who was about my age and had the same educational background, and I was identifying with him. He was now residing at the Brockton VA hospital. He was having problems surrendering to the disease and taking step 1. He continued to have problems with drinking, and his life was unmanageable. He was living at the VA hospital. I knew that to avoid a similar fate, I could no longer drink in safety. Reading the literature. I started reading Living Sober and carrying with me on my commute to Boston. I put a book cover over it so it could tell, so you could not tell what I was reading. Living Sober is an extremely informative book, which does not offer a plan for getting sober, but does offer us a sound advice on how to stay sober. Basic essential information from Alcoholics Anonymous. As the book states, anyone can get sober. The trick is to stay sober. I found the contents index very helpful. It starts out, number 1, using this booklet. Number 2, staying away from the first drink. Number 3, using the 24-hour plan. Number 4, remembering that alcohol is incurable, progressive, fatal disease. Number 5, the saying, live and let live. Number 6, getting active. Number 7, using the serenity prayer. Number 8, changing old routines. Number 9, eating or drinking something usually sweet. Number 10, the use of telephone therapy. Number 11, availing yourself of a sponsor. Number 12, getting plenty of rest. Number 13, first things first slogan. Number 14, fending off loneliness. Number 15, watching out for anger and resentments. Number 16, being good to yourself. Number 17, looking out over elation. Number 18, easy does it slogan. Number 19, being grateful. 20, remembering your last drink. 21, avoiding dangerous drugs and medication. 22, eliminating self-pity. 23, seeking professional help. 24, steering clear of emotional entanglements. 25, getting out of the if trap. 26, being wary of drinking occasion. 27, letting go of old ideas. 28, reading the AA message. 29, going to AA meetings. 30, trying the 12 steps. 31, finding your own way. 32, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Some questions often asked by new non-drinkers. Living Sober offers some answers. What do I say and do at drinking parties? Should I keep liquor in the house? Do I explain to people why I'm not drinking now? How about sex? How about insomnia? What about drinking dreams? Should I go into bars? What can I do when I get lonely? As long as I'm happy, am I safe? Should I seek professional help? Is it necessary to give up old companions and habits? From the Living Sober AA book. When we first stopped drinking, many of us found it useful to look back at habits surrounding our drinking, and whenever possible, to change a lot of small things. I started to change some old habits and develop the new healthy habits. I thought it was a good idea to stay away from package stores and bars. From Living Sober, an AA book. For some of us, lunchtime was usually an hour or two of liquid refreshment. When we first stopped drinking, instead of going to restaurants or steakhouses where the waiters or bartenders always knew what we wanted without being told, it made good sense to head in a different direction for lunch, and it is especially helpful to eat with other non-drinkers. I knew I could not go to bars for lunch, so I found noontime meetings instead. From Living Sober, the AA book, eating or drinking, sometimes usually sweet. Can you imagine drinking a bourbon in a soda right after a chocolate malt, or a beer on top of a piece of cake with icing? If you're not too ill to read on, you will agree they don't sound exactly made for each other. In one way, that is what this portion of our experience is about. Many of us have learned that something sweet-tasting on almost any nourishing food or snack seems to dampen a bit the desire for a drink. So from time to time, we remind each other never to get too hungry. Another trick that I found helpful was to keep hard candy in my pocket, and when I started to get anxious about a drink, I would pop some in my mouth. I also started reading a daily reflection book, the 24-hour book, a Hazelton book. AA had not published their daily reflection book yet. It was published in September 1990. The 24-hour book is intended for members of Alcoholics Anonymous as a help in their program of living one day at a time. It is designed for those who want to start each day with a few minutes of thought, meditation, and prayer. Fellowship. Go to meetings regularly. It's suggested to do 90 meetings in 90 days when you're first trying to identify. Go to some of the same meetings. People in the meetings will start to get to know you. Eventually find a home group and get active with that group. Get telephone numbers as you attend meetings and start to use them. How to treat the physical, mental, and spiritual to stay sober. Ask for help. You could develop a higher power of your choice. I call my higher power God. Start to talk to other alcoholics. Start to get into physical exercising to treat the physical part of the disease. I started running and walking. Keep candy in your pocket for when the desire for a drink occurs. Alcohol has a lot of sugar in it. I never had a DUI, but I did have one arrest for drunk, PC. I never went to a detox, which is not necessarily a good idea. There can be problems of detoxing yourself. From the big book in chapter 2, The Employees. For most alcoholics who are drinking or who are just getting over a spree, certain amount of physical treatment is desirable, even imperative. The matter of physical treatment should of course be referred to your own doctor. From Living Sober, the AA book, in the section using this booklet on detoxing. Sometimes getting sober can be done on your own at home, but frequently prolonged drinking has caused such serious medical problems that you would be better advised to seek medical or hospital help for drying out. If you are that seriously ill, you may need such professional services before you can possibly be interested in what we offer here. I detoxed myself. I did not go to a detox or seek medical help with my withdrawal from alcohol. I think I had stopped drinking for about a week when suddenly I started to have pains all over my body, and I decided to go to the company clinic for help. The clinic suggested I go to the emergency room at the New England Medical Center, where they performed blood tests, and they said that my liver functions were way out of the normal range. They suggested that I make an appointment with my primary care doctor. When I finally got to see my primary care doctor after a couple of weeks, he did a new blood test, and my liver function were now in an acceptable range. He informed me that in the past my liver functions have been slightly out of the normal range. I could not remember him saying that in the past, but I'm not sure it would have made any difference when I was drinking. Another example of problems with detoxing, my cousin Mark. My cousin Mark was from my mother's side of the family. He lived in Charlestown, was having a problem with drugs and alcohol. I was going through my divorce and I was living in South Boston. So I go to the early bird meeting at St. Monica's Church in South Boston every morning before work. I would often see Mark at that meeting. I would talk to him after the meeting and try to encourage him to stay sober, but he was having a rough time staying sober. He finally was able to get into a detox. While he was withdrawing from alcohol at the detox, he went into convulsions and had a heart attack and died. Another example of problems with detoxing, my friend Bob the Chimney Sweep. Bob and I started getting sober in Marshfield about the same time. He and I would see each other at meetings. We started to talk to each other at the meeting and became friends. Bob went out one more time drinking and was being driven to a detox by a friend. He started to go into convulsions from alcohol withdrawal. So the friend pulled over at one of the gas stations near the Route 3 entrance on 139 in Marshfield. He ran into the store and got Bob a Coke. I happened to be getting gas at the gas station while all of this was going on. The Coke stopped the convulsions and Bob got safely to a detox. This time he stayed sober and stayed sober until his death, which was about 20 years later. He came down with stomach cancer and refused chemotherapy. He tried treating it holistically and had 5 productive years. Over these years, he cleaned my chimney several times. I always admire Bob's courage and perseverance. I've decided to follow a similar approach to my cancer.